Full Metal Alchemist is my favorite manga ever written. I've thought a lot about a specific character to do analysis on from this story. My problem has always been that either the character's question and answer are too clear in the story, and so there's nothing more I would have to say, or they are too hidden, and thus it was hard for even me to find out what the question and answer are. However, I think that I have finally found a character that is worth taking a philosophical look at. Ling Yao is one of the best characters in Full Metal Alchemist, in my opinion. Despite his character being pretty clear and straightforward, his philosophical questions to the story are not as straightforward. In this video, I want to look at what question Ling asks of the world of Full Metal Alchemist, as well as how he answers that question. We will then see how his answer applies to our world and how we can apply this knowledge to our own lives. So before we go any further, we need to define what question does Ling ask in the manga Full Metal Alchemist. The answer is not quite as obvious as it may seem at first. Specifically for Ling, I believe that his involvement with greed kinda obscures what his actual question is. But I believe the question that Ling asks of his world is what qualities make a good ruler. Through the several interactions that Ling has throughout the series with various characters, including greed, we see that this question runs throughout the future Emperor's thoughts and actions. So, now that we know the question, how does Ling answer it? I believe that Ling shows us two distinct things that, when brought together, form the makeup of a good ruler. These two things are power and humility. Pay attention to the order in which I said those two, because part of Ling's character is to show us how these traits come together to make a good ruler. To fully see that, we're going to break down both of these things and see how Ling shows us that this is what a ruler needs to embody. First, we must discuss the question of power. Normally, a story like this would not focus on a ruler needing to be powerful, but Ling, and really the story of Full Metal Alchemist in general, does give emphasis to this character trait. I believe after reading the series again that Ling is one of the physically strongest human beings we see in the whole series. He is able to go toe-to-toe in swordsmanship against King Bradley, who we know is the most skilled combatant in the entire world. This shows that Ling must have gone through an enormous amount of training in the only 15 years of life that he has had so far to get to the level of strength that he currently has. Not only that, but Ling has the ability to sense what's called the Dragon's Pulse. This is the ability to sense things and people in his presence. If we are to relate this ability to the ability of chi sensing, which we see in a lot of Eastern martial arts, then this act as well must have taken years to achieve. This means that Ling has spent an enormous amount of time making sure that he is powerful enough by himself to rule his kingdom effectively. Not only is physical might a necessary trait, but Ling also seeks out powerful and capable subordinates. His two aides, Lan Fan and Fu, are both extremely capable combatants, if not even more so than Ling himself. Along the same line, he aligns himself with people who can help him later. We see this most evidently in his ability to make a deal with Barry the Chopper, as well as Mustang's crew, so that they may mutually benefit each other in the future. In fact, we see that deal come to fruition very quickly, as he is responsible in part for capturing the homunculus Gluttony. There is perhaps no instance in the entire series that shows more clearly that power is necessary for the ruler than when Ling accepts greed willingly into his own body. The mere act of accepting this process that could very well end in his demise means that Ling is willing to undergo any hardship if it means he will attain even a sliver of power. This instance also shows us that Ling is not only physically a force to be reckoned with, but mentally one as well. We're told by Bradley that when a Philosopher's Stone is put into a human being, the souls within the stone and the human being's own soul fight amongst themselves until one is left, because existing within a Philosopher's Stone is nearly impossible for a human being to withstand mentally. However, Ling is able to exist inside of greed as an independent being without being mentally strained. This shows that not only was Ling's body trained extensively, but so was his mind, meaning that for Ling, power was an essential to being a good ruler. This leads us to the second major character trait that is necessary for a ruler, being humility. Humility is possibly Ling's most obvious trait. We meet Ling as a starving foreigner, begging for help. We can see from the reactions of Lan, Fan, and Fu that this is not socially acceptable. However, Ling has no problem begging for food or assistance when he needs it. We see also in his treatment of the people around him, in that he almost always views everyone around him as his friends, even if they're on relatively rocky terms, such as him and Ed. This means that in Ling's mind, the people around him are not subordinate to him, but equals, and it is only birthright and circumstance that separates their social standing. This is illustrated very poignantly in his first fight with King Bradley. Lan Fan at this point is severely injured and Ling is attempting to escape with her. Keeping in mind that Lan Fan is Ling's servant, meaning that by social standing, he is well within his rights to leave her behind and escape himself, which is exactly what Bradley tells him to do. However, Ling responds to Bradley by saying, "A king exists for his people. Without his people, he can be no king. King Bradley, you will never be a true king." This statement shows that Ling does not consider himself above even the lowest of his subjects, and thus would sacrifice himself for any single one of them. This is one of the greatest showings of why a ruler must be humble in the entire series. However, the most impactful event for Ling in the series is when him and Greed become one being. His acceptance of Greed, who is not human but a homunculus, and a rather unpleasant homunculus at that, shows that he is willing to accept anyone. Specifically, the end, where it is clear that Ling is trying to save Greed from being reabsorbed by Father, it shows that Ling has accepted and cares for something that isn't even human, showing a level of humility that would go beyond even most characters in this series. So now that we have seen these two characteristics and how they play out in Ling's life specifically, what does this have to do with what a ruler is? Well, this is where we need to return to Bradley. Bradley certainly possesses power, as he is quite literally the most powerful person in the military. We see this from his extraordinary combat abilities that allowed him to single-handedly take down a tank. We see that he is also mentally very strong, as he is a great commander and swift decision-maker on the battlefield. However, he possesses no humility whatsoever. This is clearly because of his status as a homunculus. However, even so, his lack of humility paints him clearly as a lackluster ruler, and one that we would not want to be led by. But there is one other ruler we see in this show who unfortunately is also incorrect, but Bradley's opposite. That is the leader of the Ishbalan religion. During the Civil War, he comes to King Bradley and asks for Bradley to take his life, and thus end the war and the suffering of thousands. This act shows all the humility in the world, where the most high-ranking member of one side of the Civil War goes to the other side and lays down his life for his people. The problem is, he had no power at all. This led to Bradley simply denying his request, and thus the war continued on, despite the fact that he still lost his life. This shows us the story deems these two qualities essential for a ruler, and it shows that Ling has these two qualities in abundance. So to recap, the question Ling asks of the world of Fullmetal Alchemist is what qualities are necessary for a great ruler to possess. He answers this decisively by saying power and humility are the two essential characteristics for a great ruler. So how does this transfer into our world? We have no shortage of rulers in our world, whether it's specifically your boss at the job you work at or the president of the country you live in. We are all ruled by someone. So we are left with the question, if these two qualities really do make a good leader. And I think the answer is a resounding yes. The quality of humility has been hailed as one of the greatest qualities a leader can possess, and that's because a leader must be able to sympathize and relate with those that he or she leads. Without humility, leaders become radical and totalitarian, and we've seen many examples of that. It is also true that leaders need power, whether it's the manager who has the ability to fire you or the president who has military might at his disposal. This is necessary, and that's because power helps protect the weak. If your boss had an emotional breakdown every single time someone did something incorrectly, that would slow the whole business down incredibly. So power, sometimes physical, but most definitely mental, is necessary for any level of leadership in our real world. So if you're looking to lead, or you're in a position of leadership right now, remember these two qualities. If strength of spirit or body is what you lack, spend time training yourself to become better in those areas. And if you lack humility, realize that we are all fundamentally the same, and thus we all deserve the same state in life. Ling Yao is one of my favorite characters in Full Metal Alchemist, and I think through him we can see one of the best leaders that fiction has ever brought us. Thanks so much for listening to this video. I wanted to do this video for a long time. I really like Ling, as I said earlier, and Full Metal Alchemist is literally my favorite manga. So definitely, if you liked anything I had to say, please like this video. Leave a comment down in the comment section. I'd love to talk with you about Ling. Do you think I'm right, wrong? What are your thoughts on leadership? I'd love to have that conversation down there with you. And subscribe to the channel. I'm hoping to bring you these kind of videos, these more kind of deeper videos, every once in a while, and my weekly Shonen newsletter will be coming out every single week, along with the Pillow Fort podcast that is going on right now. So definitely subscribe to the channel. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. But until next time, this is Shonen Express signing off.